Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and a continuing series Castlevania Chronicles, where I review every single mainline Castlevania game ever made in the order in which it was released. And today on Castlevania Chronicles, we have Castlevania Chronicles. That's not entirely true. I'm going to be mixing PlayStation 1 footage of Akumajo Dracula alongside the Sharp X68000 original version. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I knew a lot of people maybe didn't play this one, and when they asked me how, it's going to be a lot easier to explain how to play it on PlayStation 1 than on an old Japanese computer. But it's a remake of the NES original, and in that little alcove with flea men jumping out, there used to be wall meat, the first instance of wall meat in a Castlevania game, actually. But because this is a remake, the developers got a little cheeky there and decided to put flea men in instead. But if you haven't been watching the entire series, if you never played Castlevania 1, you're going to see the first boss is a bat, and that is exactly mirroring the NES original. But this is not just a stage-for-stage remake. This expands greatly on that formula, so it's like a remake and a reimagining of that original game. But whatever it is one of my favorite 2D Castlevania games of all time, because this is pure 2D Castlevania action through and through. Let's move over to the X68000 version. There are very few differences between the PlayStation 1 version and the X68000 version. Both are able to play the MIDI audio back, and that's what I'm playing right now. The PlayStation 1 version has some minor graphical enhancements in original mode, and there is an arranged mode which changes things up. I am not playing that because I don't consider that part of the mainline entry. But we gotta beat these boogers down here. It's a really weird thing in Castlevania, wall boogers. It's the first and I think only time they've ever been seen. But this game, I would say, is like 1 to 2% not as good as Rondo of Blood. This is probably my second favorite 2D Castlevania game ever made, to be entirely honest with you. And unlike Rondo that has those branching paths, this feels even more like a pure instance of what Castlevania used to be. It's like the last best version of Castlevania before Rondo got a little bit Metroidvania on us, and then Symphony of the Night got all the way Metroidvania. But this is a hard game. It is not forgiving, and in the US PlayStation version it is harder than the Japanese PC original, and it is going to make you work for all of your continues. You're going to die a lot, you're going to have to learn the boss patterns, but I mean, come on, this giant skeleton dragon, that is an incredible boss. I love this game through and through for what it's doing. It is near and dear to my heart, and it is basically perfection in my eyes. And that comes down to three very distinct reasons. One, I love the graphical style of this game, whether it's the X68000 original or the slightly enhanced PlayStation 1 version. Secondarily, the action is amazing. It is as good as Rondo of Blood as far as the action is concerned. And third, this has some of the best music in the franchise until you get to Symphony of the Night, and I love the MIDI implementation. It just sounds so much more fun. But you get some weird enemies here. You get that giant centipede worm, whatever it is, attacking you, and you have statues that are shooting arrows at you that will stick in your body if you get hit. This game is just filled with detail. You can tell the developers are wondering, what if we had current technology when we made the original NES version? I even love how this game kind of plays around with pacing. You gotta be slow and precise to get that cross up there. But when I say this game has one of my favorite soundtracks of all time, I mean it. And once we get past this little ice stage here, which is very difficult and you need to time your jumps perfectly, I'll let you listen to a little bit of it. I'm going to let you listen to 3 different tracks because they're all that good. But I love this section here with everything frozen in the ice. But listen to this. The original soundtrack is great, but the MIDI implementation is one of my favorite gaming soundtracks of all time, and I'll let you listen to some more shortly. And you'll see here, the boss fight, again, it's just an incredible experience. The graphics in the background, the sound, the patterns, this is what I want when I play a Castlevania game. Now, the only downside to the PlayStation 1 versions, outside of some real-time clock-based things that I'll explain when they would appear, is that there's like a 5-second delay between getting to the boss room and having the boss fight load in, because it has to get that audio spooled up from the CD versus just reading from a disc. But honestly, it really isn't much of an issue whatsoever. But interestingly, this has a really fun factoid that I'll tell you in a second. But I love this area in the game. You're crawling up these stairs, and this statue is crumbling behind you but still standing, almost like there's scaffolding around it, and you get the classic red invincible skeletons all around you. But what's going on here is Bloody Tears is playing in the background, and there's a statue crying literal bloody tears. It's the only time in my memory that I've ever seen an actual bloody tear in a Castlevania game, and it is just amazing. When I say that the MIDI implementation is spectacular, you have to hear bloody tears in MIDI if you never have. It is absolutely amazing, so enjoy and I will be right back. They're just hands down my favorite version of that particular song, and of course it is a remake of Castlevania. You gotta have Medusa in here as well, and you can basically stand toe to toe with her even in the harder version of the game. As long as you have holy water, you can stagger her just enough to get those whip hits in and be able to take her down. And that's the thing, most of the bosses in this game can be cheesed in some way or another, but most of the bosses in all Castlevania games can be said the same for, so it really isn't a strike against the game. But this also has maybe my favorite clock tower in any Castlevania game as well. I would say it might even be better than the clock tower in Rondo of Blood, just with all the animations of all those gears turning in the background, these night skeletons. But it's going to kill you. It's still Castlevania. You're going to miss a jump now and again. The timing in the clock tower, you need to be impeccable or else you are going to die. But that's what I love so much about this game, is that when you die, it's because you weren't doing something fast enough. This has very little of that Castlevania cheapness. You're going to get knocked back and die now and again, but outside of one jump in the game that feels almost impossible, this I feel like might be one of the fairest Castlevania games of all. If you die, it's down to your skill level, not that the game was trolling you and wanted to take a life away. Don't you even get these small physics puzzles here with these little, I don't know, boards, whatever they are, that you have to stand on and use your weight to bring down. And they love to put enemies in very difficult spots in this game, and you really need to pay attention to how you're moving your character around. Screen placement is paramount in this game. If you're in the wrong spot, you're not going to be able to hit the enemies that are coming towards you. All you're going to do is take damage, and that can be a real pain. And of course, flying Medusa heads while a walkway just breaks underneath you, difficult as hell. Of course it's an edit, now you don't need to see it, but I probably died 8 times here just getting across the bridge. But it was always because I jumped at the wrong time or I didn't whip the right Medusa head. If you screw up, it's on you. But like I said, this game is just beautiful. I love all the colors in it. It goes from those drab kind of earth tones to this very regal blue and purple, the colors of royalty. And it's even a very interesting stage where you have some classic Castlevania bats flying around with these possessed dolls. But in the entire game, this next song is my absolute favorite out of any of the Castlevania music ever. So give it 20 seconds and again, I'll be right back. You seriously can't go wrong with any track in the entire soundtrack. I think this is probably, outside of Symphony of the Night, the best music Castlevania has ever had. I would even say slightly better than Rondo, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments about that. It just has everything that I love, and that's just because I grew up in the MIDI era and I love that sound. But now that we're getting further out of the game, you just see things start getting wild. We have all these mirrors with a pseudo-reflection in them. You have axes flying all over the place. You need to be perfect on your jumps. And you even get a mirror match with yourself, and it kind of looks a little bit like a werewolf. But again, if there's one strike I could give the game, is that most of the bosses are just pretty much easy to go toe-to-toe with, and if you get in the right spot, you can basically tank those hits and kill them. Because you can see here, I'm just going to get into a whipping contest, and I'm going to be able to just basically stun lock and cheese this boss into submission. So it might not be the best boss fight, but I do love that shards of glass shoot out of his mouth and chest after you kill him. And another thing I love about this game that I feel goes a little bit harder than most Castlevania games before you get to Symphony of the Night is the level of violence, because this was just released in Japan, and back then they got more violence than North America did, and that has since changed. But you see all these skeletons, all the blood on the ground. Soon you're going to see cadavers and torture victims, and you see people in the prison cells trying to get away. And where else can you play skeleton jump rope with barbed bones? This game is just creative. It is constantly throwing new and exciting things at you, Every single stage feels fresh and exciting, and like I said, you see a half dismembered body, just the torso and the arms, with its entire bottom half completely missing and underneath the table. And that's not something you see in Castlevania games of this era outside of that game, and I do appreciate it for it. But you come up into this nice pastoral scene here, and you're wondering, how did you get there from Dracula's castle? And then suddenly, as you walk forward, the painting breaks from the wall and you can see the pattern behind it. It's such a small touch here. Even this sea of people, probably trapped in limbo, their souls, stuck for eternity. It's just so much fun. Even the death fight is fun. Although again, you'll see here, straight from start to finish, it is not a hard fight. Bring an axe in, I'm going to take some hits, but it's pretty easy to get death down in one go. Compared to Rondo of Blood, where death can sometimes take you 10-12 lives if you haven't played in a while, this death fight isn't that hard whatsoever. And that's fine, not every single boss has to drive you absolutely insane. That's what I love about this game. The pacing is great, and something like this when the chandelier falls and you get that pseudo lighting effect on the wall and the flames are coming in, this has the most detail of any Castlevania game until you get to the PlayStation 1 era, because of course, nothing can stand toe-to-toe with Symphony of the Night when it comes to details. You even get some Kung Fu Maids, and I'm sure you know where those are going to end up next. But yeah, this game is just a 10 out of 10. The only complaint I have about it whatsoever is some of the boss fights could be a little bit harder, but honestly that's barely even a complaint. But what Akumajo Dracula truly is a perfect remake of the NES original and an expansion on that formula. And if you didn't grow up with the NES, and maybe you don't have nostalgia for the 8-bit era, but you had a Super Nintendo and you've never played this game, play it, because this is the era you grew up in and you're going to love it. And Dracula throws that cup of wine off to the side, or probably blood, and I wonder where you've seen that before. A lot of the cues in this game, whole cloth, end up in both Rondo and Symphony of the Night, and I love it for that. Even the Dracula battle, relatively easy, probably the easiest Dracula outside of maybe the original Castlevania where you can stun lock him, but I do love the transition as these globules of blood and plasma, or at least what I assume are blood and plasma, float around until his demon form comes out. It is just amazing with that thrown in the background and all those fires on the pillars. It is so much fun to see. So yeah, that is Castlevania Chronicles and some footage from Akumajo Dracula on the Sharp X68000 blended together. This is my favorite Castlevania game that's not called Rondo of Blood, and honestly, if you ask me next week, this might be my favorite Castlevania game over Rondo of Blood. And of course, it's not a Castlevania if Dracula's castle doesn't crumble into the earth. But I'll be back next week with another Castlevania video. I'll have a video start the week as well. But short of that, if you see any vampires, don't let them into your house. Don't forget, they need permission to come in. Don't give it to them. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.